Okay, so I still got the two birds from the Geiger lookout toss pulled up under the same file as you see right there. There's the header that both bird paths are saved under, and then there's 127. There is 301. Both of these were blue bar cocks that both did well in this 73-mile training toss. I'm going to show you some of the other features now within Google Earth. There's quite a bit of things in here that this does that a lot of people don't even know about. You probably do know when you click these icons, each one of these tells you, so on that training toss, it took a hit. This was March 28th, back in the spring, at 9:42 and 57 seconds. It took a GPS hit. Speed in meters a minute is right there. There was a tailwind that morning, and this was on a downslope of the hill where it tends to get pretty windy. That bird reached a speed of 2,340 meters a minute. Yards per minute is actually faster than that. The conversion rate is about 1.093. So if you take 2,340 times 1.093, the bird was actually flying a little bit over 2,550 yards a minute. Pretty fast. I've actually had them up to about 2,900 yards a minute on one training toss for a stretch of a few miles. The height is in meters. Again, there's a formula for that. Meters to feet is about 3.28. So if you take 3.28 times the height, you'll get the correct feet. I think it was around 6,600 feet is what that bird was flying at. And then the direction it's heading, that is the direction the bird was tilted. Satellite's 12, it pretty much always says that if it's got a good signal strength. And then I'm not sure what HTOP means, but I don't think it's that useful for us. I'm going to exit out of there. We know with that icon he was flying about 6,600 feet. If I come down here to the bottom and zoom in, you can see the actual ground elevation where I've got my mouse is 5,300 feet. He was flying about 6,600 feet off, or total, so that means he was about 1,300 feet higher than ground level, which is a pretty good number. Most of the time they fly around 800 to 1,000 feet off the ground. Unfortunately, quite a few times I'll see them lower too, which I don't like, but I have had them up to 3,000 to even 4,000 and 5,000 feet off the ground level, which is way up there. I mean, when they're 4,000 or 5,000 feet, it's unlikely the average person could even see them. 3,000 feet I've had him hit quite a few times. 4,000 or 5,000 feet, just one bird on one toss. It was the same bird, and he was doing it for quite a while. He also overshot the loft and overflew by about 8 miles too. So you can see when they're that high up, they have a hard time even seeing where the loft is. I don't know if he was scared from a hawk or up that high to avoid hawks or what. But so these little icons will tell you quite a bit of useful stuff, and if you've got a calculator handy, you can see exactly, you know, where they were in relation to ground level. Here, you know, this bird was still 2,100 meters a minute, but not quite the ridiculous speeds of before. And the last cool thing I was going to show you is one of the cool things that this does, if we back out here, is it will create an elevation profile for each bird. So if you come over here to the left, in the last videos I showed you that there's quite a bit of data and stuff under these little icons when you open this up. So for number 301, if you open this up, you click that little icon which gives you his points and paths. Well, if you actually open that up again, if I click on this, it would give you all of his points, but I'm not looking for that right now. Is flight path, which is the actual line over here. So if I click that, I can turn that off but leave the points there. But what I'm after is if you right click on flight path, and this is the only section you can do this in, you can go down there here to elevation profile. So right click on flight path and then go to elevation profile. Now you can see at the bottom of the screen, first of all it zooms out right here. At the bottom of the screen it gives me an actual elevation profile that I can drag this mouse along. So this bird started at 4,760 feet. That's not what he was at, but that's what the ground level was. And then this tells me the terrain that he flew over and then the distance he was at each point. So this is how you also find out how many total miles the birds flew. This is the easiest way to do it. So you can see this essentially gives you the mountain ranges, and sure enough right there, this big bowl that you see, that's Lake Tahoe. If you come up here, as I drag that mouse along, it's telling you how many miles he's done at that point, the elevation that he's flying over, and then either the downgrade or the upgrade of the elevation. This was a 73.5 mile toss. Sure enough, when I get to the end over here, if you get down there you can see it, he flew 81 miles is what he actually flew, and then the final elevation at my loft is 1,782 feet, which is when he's in the loft. That's the elevation he's at. Again, these are not what his height is, this is what the elevation he flew over, but then if you come up to these icons you can do the difference and see where he was at that specific time. So that's pretty helpful for seeing the terrain that they flew over, besides just looking at it for yourself if you just want a sort of a quick view. But it's also good for seeing how many miles they flew. So 73 miles, or 73.5 miles, and he flew 81. He took a pretty efficient path, although that probably, you know, over the course of a longer race you'd want him a little bit more efficient. Generally, from what I've found, is when they're going to do well in a race, they need to be probably somewhere around 5 to 10% at most extra from what the distance of the race is. So if they're somewhere around 5 to 8%, that would be sort of a winning distance or winning speed type bird. When they start getting up around, you know, 15% flying longer than what they should have, that definitely means they got off track somewhere. So this is the easiest way to check it. Again, that's flight path and then elevation profile, which is right there. I'm going to back these out of here, and again, then it gets a little bit easier to see all the files together. But so when you open up these different files, there's a lot of extra little things in there. One more thing is, if you go to these points, actually let me close this elevation profile real quick. If you go to these points on the screen, just use this one for example. When you click these points, just like usual, you can right click on those points and go to properties, and you can see it puts a little flashing icon around that point. If I wanted to change the name of that point or change the icon, let's say in this particular case I wanted to change it to red, and I could hit OK. Let's say something significant happened there, the bird stopped or whatever. A lot of times when you see him stop, you'll see several points stacked up, a bunch of them together, because it's taking a hit every 3 minutes. Well, you can find the first one and then mark it with something like this, and you can even label it stopped at whatever time, and then that way on your map you can see when the bird stopped, and that kind of gives you an easier way, because sometimes from a far zoom you can't tell where they stopped until you zoom in. Well, by changing the first icon where they stopped or where something significant happened, you can find it a lot easier. So any of these little icons, when you click on them and then right click, you can change the color of that specific icon, not for the whole bird, just for that little icon, and that's how you do it. Just right click on them. But normally when you click on them with the left mouse is where you get your speed, your elevation, your angle, and your time and all that stuff.